She counted the bills on the marble kitchen island at 6:14 a.m. because that was the hour she had been counting things for the last 9 years, and her body did not know how to wake up any other way. $50,000. 500 bills, 100 each, banded in stacks of 50. The banker had assembled them in the study the night before, while Mr. Ellsworth stood by the window with his back to the room and said, without turning, that she had until noon the next day to be gone from the house and gone from his life. He did not raise his voice. He did not have to. Men who own 3 houses on 2 continents never have to. Constance Owusu Boateng did not know then what she knew now. She did not know that by 4:47 p.m. that same afternoon every one of those 500 bills would be gone, and that when Mr. Ellsworth learned where they had gone, he would sit down on the 3rd step of his own staircase and not stand up for 1 hour and 11 minutes. She did not know that the woman he had just paid to disappear was carrying something out of that house that no amount of money could have purchased. She only knew that she had until noon, and that before she left there was 1 drawer in the library she still needed to close. Constance was 52 years old, 5 feet 3 inches tall, and 109 pounds, which was 14 pounds less than she had weighed when she first walked into the Ellsworth home on a Monday morning in the summer of 2017. She had lost most of the weight in the first 2 years, when the older Mrs. Ellsworth was still alive, and Constance was learning how a household of that size ran, and the rest of it slowly across the 7 years since, one skipped dinner at a time. Because for 6 of those 7 years she had been sending $380 every 2 weeks to a small brick building on the outskirts of Kumasi that most people in the Ellsworth home did not know existed. She wore a gray cotton dress that morning, plain mid-calf. The kind of dress that costs $11 at a thrift store on Livernois Avenue in Detroit and lasts 9 years if you wash it by hand and hang it inside the laundry room away from the sun. Her shoes were black, flat, worn at the left heel because she favored that foot when she stood at the sink for long hours. She smelled faintly of shea butter and the lemon polish she used on the library's shelves every Tuesday and Friday. Her hair was pulled back into a knot at the base of her neck, held with a wooden pin her grandmother had carved for her in 1986 in a village outside Cape Coast, before her grandmother's hands got too shaky to carve anything at all. The pin was one of 2 objects she had brought with her from Ghana in 2003. The other was a small leather notebook, softened at the corners, its cover the color of dried tobacco. Inside the notebook were 9 years of columns, written in a small, careful hand. Dates on the left, amounts in the middle, names on the right. 6 of those names were children's names. The oldest was 15 now. The youngest had turned 4 in March. Constance had never met any of them in person. She knew their faces only from the photographs the woman in Kumasi sent her twice a year, folded into letters written on lined paper in a handwriting that always leaned slightly to the right. The woman in Kumasi was Constance's younger sister, Amma, who had opened a small home for children whose parents had died of what the hospitals in Kumasi still called, quietly, the long illness. Amma had 11 children in the home now. Constance's $380 every 2 weeks paid for 6 of them. Rice, school uniforms, 1 pair of shoes per child per year, a doctor's visit when it could not be avoided. Amma covered the rest through the church and through her own small tailoring business, which she ran out of the front room of the same building where the children slept. Mr. Ellsworth had never asked Constance where she sent the money. He had never asked Constance anything about her life outside his house. In 9 years of employment, he had asked her exactly 4 personal questions, and 3 of those had been about the temperature of his coffee. The 4th had been on a Sunday afternoon in November of 2019, when he passed through the kitchen while Constance was reading a letter at the counter, and he stopped and asked, without much interest, whether the letter was from home. Constance had said yes. He had nodded once and walked out. That was the closest they had ever come to a conversation. Rowan Ellsworth was 61 years old, 6'1", and the founder of a private equity firm on the 22nd floor of a glass building downtown that most of the people who worked in it were not permitted to name in public. He had inherited the house from his father in 1998 and had lived in it alone since his wife died in April of 2016, 6 months before Constance was hired. He had a daughter in Zurich who called on Christmas Eve and on his birthday and no other days. He had a study on the 2nd floor with a green leather chair that had belonged to his grandfather, and a library on the 1st floor with 3,200 books that Constance had dusted, one at a time, every 3rd Wednesday of the month, for 9 years. He did not know that Constance had read 140 of those books over the same 9 years, always at night, always returning them to the exact shelf position, always folding a strip of brown paper into the spot to mark her page, and removing the strip before she went to bed. He did not know that she had organized the library differently in her mind than the way it stood on the shelves. In her mind, the books were arranged by what they felt like, not by what they were about. He did not know this, because he had not opened a book in his own library in 4 years. The last one he had opened had been a book of poems his wife had loved, and he had closed it after 11 pages and put it back on the shelf out of order, and Constance had found it 2 days later and returned it, without a word, to the exact place where his wife had kept it. The reason Mr. Ellsworth had given Constance $50,000 to disappear had nothing to do with any of this, and everything to do with it in a way he would not understand until much later. 2 weeks earlier, his daughter in Zurich had told him, on a call that lasted 11 minutes, that she was worried about him. She said the housekeeper had been in the home too long. She said staff who stay too long begin to think of themselves as family. She said he was vulnerable, alone in the house, and that these situations, in her experience, ended in lawsuits and quiet embarrassments. She said she had spoken to a lawyer. She said the lawyer had recommended what the lawyer called a clean severance, a large amount, a signed agreement, a door closed on Tuesday and locked by Wednesday. His daughter had never met Constance. She had spoken to her on the phone twice, both times to leave messages for her father. She could not have picked Constance out of a room of 3 women. But she was worried, and she was his only child, and Rowan Ellsworth was a man who did not know how to refuse the people who were left. So on a Monday evening in October, he had called the lawyer, and the lawyer had drawn up the agreement, and on Tuesday night, at 9:41 p.m., he had asked Constance to come to the study. He had gestured at the $50,000 on the desk. He had slid a single sheet of paper across the wood and asked her to sign it. The sheet said, in language she read twice, that she would take the money, leave the house by noon the next day, and never contact any member of the Ellsworth family again. Constance had read the sheet without expression. She had asked one question. She had asked whether she would be allowed to finish the library. She had been dusting it on a Wednesday rotation, and she was 3 shelves from the end. Mr. Ellsworth had looked at her for a long moment, and then he had said, quietly, that she could finish the library in the morning if she wanted to. Then he had turned to the window again. Constance had signed the paper. She had picked up the money. She had walked back to her room at the end of the servants' corridor on the ground floor, and she had sat on the edge of the narrow bed, and she had not cried. She had done the math instead. $380 every 2 weeks was $9,880 a year. $50,000 was, at that rate, 5 years and 1 month of children. It was 15 more school uniforms. It was 90 more pairs of shoes. It was one roof repair that Alma had been putting off for 2 years because the tarp still mostly worked. It was 300 bags of rice. It was a doctor for the 4-year-old, who had a cough Alma had described in the last letter as small, but not going away. Constance sat on the bed and she thought about all of this, and she thought about Mr. Ellsworth's face when he had said she could finish the library. She had worked in that house for 9 years, and she knew his face the way you know the face of a person who has stopped looking at you a long time ago. He had not been cruel to her. He had simply not seen her, and now he was writing her out of his life with the same politeness he used to send back a soup that was too cold. She did not sleep that night. At 4:30 a.m., she got up, and she washed her face, and she put on the gray dress and the wooden pin, and she went to the library and finished the last 3 shelves. She dusted each book with the same soft cloth she had used for 9 years. She returned each one to the exact place it had been. When she was done, at 6:04 a.m., she went to the kitchen, and she made herself a cup of tea, and she counted the money one more time on the marble island, because her body did not know how to wake up any other way. Then she put the $50,000 back into the leather bag Mr. Ellsworth had provided, and she walked out of the house at 6:42 a.m. through the side door, and she did not look back at the windows. She did not go to a bus station. She did not go to a bank. She went first to a small storefront on the east side of the city, a place called Adam Wire Transfers, wedged between a barber shop and a shop that sold prayer candles and phone cards. The woman behind the counter, a Ghanaian woman named Rebecca who had known Constance since 2011, looked up when the bell rang and said good morning without particular interest. And then she saw Constance's face, and she stopped what she was doing. Constance placed the leather bag on the counter. She said she needed to send $42,000 to Kumasi, to the account of Ama Owusu Boateng, and she needed the transfer to go today, not tomorrow, and she needed the receipt in her hand before she left the store. Rebecca did not ask any questions. Rebecca had been sending Constance's $380 every 2 weeks for 11 years. She knew where the money went. She counted the bills twice, ran them through the machine, and processed the transfer. It took 41 minutes. By 8:03 a.m., the money was gone from Constance's hands and on its way to a small brick building on the outskirts of Kumasi. Constance took the receipt, folded it in half again, and slid it into the leather notebook. Then she walked out of Adam Wire Transfers with $8,000 still in the bag, and she went to her next stop. If this story is settling into you the way I think it is, subscribe so you don't miss what happens when Mr. Ellsworth finds out where that money went. Because he will find out. And when he does, the story turns in a direction none of them expected. Her next stop was a small law office on Gratiot Avenue, a 2-room practice run by a Nigerian woman named Mrs. Adeyemi Bright, who had helped Constance in 2018 with a matter concerning her sister's guardianship of the children in Kumasi. Constance had made an appointment the night before, at 10:14 p.m., using the phone at the end of the servants' corridor. She sat across from Mrs. Bright at 8:47 a.m., and she placed $4,500 on the desk, and she said she needed a formal legal document, drafted today, that would create a small trust in Ghana for the 6 children she had been supporting. She wanted the trust structured so that if anything ever happened to her, the money would continue to reach the children through Alma. She wanted the document notarized and filed, and a copy sent to Alma by international courier. Mrs. Bright asked her 3 practical questions and then began drafting. It took 2 hours. Constance signed the trust document at 11:12 a.m. She paid the $4,500. She walked out with a copy folded into her leather notebook, and she had $3,500 left. She spent $1,200 of it at a small clinic on Mack Avenue on a full medical examination for herself. She had been putting it off for 2 years. She had a lump above her left collarbone that had appeared in the spring, and a cough that came and went, and a soreness in her lower back that she had told herself was from the standing. The doctor was a young black woman with kind eyes who spent 45 minutes with Constance and did not rush her once. The tests would take a week. The doctor said she wanted Constance back in 7 days no matter what the results were. Constance said she would come. She spent $800 on a plane ticket to Accra, one way, leaving in 11 days, because she wanted the doctor's results first, and she wanted to see her sister and the children before she decided what came next. She spent $400 on a small hotel room near the airport for the 11 nights until her flight. Not a fancy room, a clean one, a door that locked, a window that opened. She spent $200 on new shoes because her old shoes had a hole in the left sole that had been there for 3 months, and she was going to need to walk a lot in Kumasi. She spent $600 on gifts. A set of colored pencils for each of the 6 children. A dress for her sister. A radio for the woman down the road from her sister who had listened to Amma's radio for 6 years because her own had broken in 2019. A bag of tea for the pastor at the church that had helped Amma with the rent one winter. A wooden crib for the 4-year-old, because Amma had mentioned in the last letter that the little one had grown out of the old one and was sleeping in a laundry basket. She spent the last $300 on a taxi to the hotel. Dinner at a small Ghanaian restaurant on Woodward, called Aunt Grace's Kitchen, where she had wakey and shito and fried plantain, and sat by the window and watched the traffic, and did not cry then either. And one long-distance phone call to Kumasi from the phone at the front desk of the hotel that lasted 26 minutes. Amma picked up on the 3rd ring. Constance did not tell her yet about the money. She only asked about the children. Amma listed them, one by one, the way she always did. Then she asked Constance if something was wrong. Constance said no. Constance said she would explain everything soon. By 4:47 p.m., every dollar of the $50,000 was gone. Mr. Ellsworth did not notice she was gone until 7:30 p.m. that night. He had been at his office all day. When he came home, he expected to find the house empty in the way houses are empty when a person has left. He expected to find her room stripped, her few things gone. He walked to the servants' corridor at the end of the ground floor, and he opened the door to her room, and he stood in the doorway for a long time. The bed was made. The pillow was fluffed. There was no note. On the small wooden table by the window was a single object. A book of poems. His wife's book of poems. Open to page 11, and on page 11, folded into the crease, was a strip of brown paper. He sat down on the edge of the bed, and he picked up the book, and he did not move for 40 minutes. He did not know then where the money had gone. He assumed, in the way men like him assumed such things, that she had banked it, or spent it on furniture, or sent it home to buy a house. He assumed the story was over. He went upstairs. He poured himself a drink. He sat in the green leather chair, and because there was nothing else to do in a house that had suddenly gotten very quiet, he walked down to the library, and he pulled a book off the shelf. Not any book. A book on grief. He had never read it. He had not known his wife had owned it. It was on the 2nd shelf of the 3rd case, and when he opened it, a piece of brown paper fell out. On the brown paper, in a small, careful hand, was a single sentence, written in pencil so faint he had to hold it up to the lamp to read it. The sentence said, "For the man who is looking, this book is on shelf 3 because it belongs next to the ones about the sea." He stood there with the paper in his hand for a long time. He walked to the next shelf. He pulled out another book, another strip of paper, another sentence in the same careful hand. This one goes with the poems, not the histories. She kept it here because she read it when she could not sleep. He went through 11 books that night. Every one of them had a strip of paper in it. Every strip of paper had a sentence. Every sentence was about his wife. Things Constance had noticed. Things his wife had done. The way she had reorganized the library in her own mind. The way Constance had preserved that organization in secret for 9 years. Because she had understood, in a way he never had, that the library was not his wife's collection, but his wife's map of what she had loved. He sat down on the 3rd step of the staircase at 10:03 p.m., and he did not stand up for 1 hour and 11 minutes. The next morning, at 7 a.m., he called the lawyer. He asked the lawyer to find out where Constance had sent the $50,000. He said he would pay whatever it cost. The lawyer said it was not that kind of transaction, and it would take time. Mr. Ellsworth said he had time. The lawyer called back on Thursday afternoon. $42,000 had been wired to an account in Kumasi belonging to a woman named Ama Owusu Boateng, registered to an address that was, according to the local records, a small home for orphaned children. Mr. Ellsworth did not speak for a moment. Then he asked the lawyer to book him a flight to Accra. He arrived in Kumasi on a Tuesday morning, 11 days after he had asked Constance to leave his house. He hired a driver at the airport. He gave the driver the address. The driver drove for 1 hour and 40 minutes on a road that turned from asphalt to red dirt. They arrived at a small brick building at the end of a lane, with a mango tree in the yard and a tarp on part of the roof. 6 children were playing in the dirt. A woman was hanging laundry on a line. Another woman was sitting under the mango tree on a low wooden stool, and she was watching a little girl, 4 years old, draw shapes on the ground with a stick. The woman on the stool was Constance. She looked up when the car door closed. She did not stand. She did not smile. She did not look surprised. She only looked at him, the way she had looked at him for 9 years, in the way of a person who sees you very clearly and has decided long ago not to expect anything from what they see. Mr. Ellsworth walked across the yard. He stopped a few feet from the stool. He said her name. He said it as though he had never said it before, which was, in a way, true. In 9 years he had called her Constance perhaps 40 times. He had called her she a great deal more often than that. He said quietly that he had come to apologize. Constance did not answer immediately. She looked at the little girl drawing shapes in the dirt. Then she looked back at him. She said, in the same voice she had used to say good morning to him for 9 years, "You are welcome to sit." He sat on a low wooden stool that Amma brought out from the house, and he stayed for 3 hours. He met the 6 children. He met Amma. He drank tea. He did not talk very much. Mostly, he listened. He learned that the 4-year-old with the cough was named Efua, and that she had been at the home since she was 7 months old. He learned that the 15-year-old was named Kwame and wanted to be a doctor. He learned that the tarp on the roof had been on the roof for 2 years because a proper repair cost $6,000, and Amma had never had $6,000 at one time. Before he left, he asked Constance a question. He asked her why she had done what she had done. He asked her why, when he had given her $50,000 and told her she was free to build any kind of life she wanted, she had given all of it away in a single day. Constance looked at him for a moment. Then she said, "You thought you were paying me to disappear. But I was already disappearing. I have been disappearing for 9 years, every 2 weeks. $380 at a time. You only saw it because the amount was bigger." She said, "A person builds their life out of what matters to them. I built mine a long time ago. You just did not know where I was building it." He did not answer. He did not know what to answer. He stood, and he thanked her, and he thanked Alma, and he walked back to the car. The driver took him back to Accra. He flew home the next morning. 3 months later, the tarp on the roof of the small brick building in Kumasi was replaced with proper tin. A second building was added to the property, with room for 6 more children. A well was dug in the yard. A woman was hired to help Alma with the cooking. A small monthly transfer began arriving in the account of Ama Owusu Boateng on the 1st of every month from a private trust registered in Zurich under a name Mr. Ellsworth's daughter had helped him set up. The trust was named after his wife. It had a 5-year plan and a 10-year plan and a plan that would outlast him. Constance had a seat on the board if she wanted it, and a salary attached to that seat that she could accept or refuse or send to Kumasi in bags of rice as she preferred. The doctor's results, when they came back, were not the worst. They were not the best either. The lump above her left collarbone was something that would require surgery and time and follow-up. Constance had the surgery in a hospital in Accra. Mr. Ellsworth paid for it, quietly, through a bill she never saw. She recovered slowly. She stayed in Kumasi. She lived in a small room at the back of the second building, near where the children slept. She read at night. She sent letters to Detroit, sometimes to Rebecca at Adam Wire Transfers, to a young black doctor on Mack Avenue, to a Nigerian lawyer named Mrs. Adeyemi Bright. She did not write to Mr. Ellsworth, but when he wrote to her, twice a year, on his birthday and on Christmas Eve, she wrote back. Rowan Ellsworth thought he was paying Constance to disappear. He thought $50,000 was the price of a woman with no family, no leverage, no future he could see from where he stood. He did not know that she had been building a future for 9 years in a place he had never asked about. He did not know that the library he had stopped looking at was arranged, in her mind, the way his wife had arranged it in her heart. He did not know that the woman who dusted his shelves every 3rd Wednesday of the month had been keeping his wife alive in the only room in the house where his wife had ever fully lived. You can hand a person an envelope. You can slide a paper across a desk. You can tell yourself you have closed a door. And you can even change the lock on that door on Tuesday morning, but you cannot end a life you were never really inside of. And you cannot buy back the years you spent not looking at the person who was watching everything you refused to see. The people we treat as invisible are not, in fact, invisible. They are only invisible to us. And the day they walk out of our houses is not the end of their story. It is very often the beginning of ours. Constance sat under the mango tree in Kumasi on the morning of her 53rd birthday, and a little girl named Efua climbed into her lap with a piece of paper folded 4 times. Efua unfolded the paper and showed her a drawing. The drawing was of a house with a tin roof and a mango tree and 6 children in the yard, and a woman in a gray dress hanging laundry on a line. In the corner of the drawing, in small careful letters, Efua had written, "Auntie Constance's house." Constance held the drawing in both hands, and she looked at the mango tree, and the tin roof, and the laundry line, and she did not cry then either. She only folded the drawing, gently, into her leather notebook, next to the receipt from Adam Wire Transfers dated a Wednesday morning in October, and she sat there for a long time in the shade with the little girl in her lap, and the whole rest of her life stretching out in front of her. Quiet and full and entirely her own. So here is the question I want you to sit with. If someone handed you $50,000 and told you to disappear, what would you build? Not buy, build. And who are the people already carrying you, in silence, whom you have not thanked, because you have not yet learned to see them? Leave your answer in the comments. I really want to read it. Subscribe for more stories about hidden strength, quiet power, and the people the world overlooks until they change everything. I'll see you in the next one.